Welcome to Folk Horror, where the world's greatest fantasies come to life. Today, we embark on a magical journey through the forests of time, to the legendary tale of Aladdin and the magical lamp, from the enchanting stories of 1001 Nights. Get ready to meet a clever young boy, a powerful genie, and a lamp filled with unimaginable secrets. Are you ready for an adventure? Then sit back, relax, and let the magic unfold. Once upon a time, there was a poor thief who had a son named Aladdin. Aladdin was a boy full of idle dreams, spending his days playing in the streets with other boys like himself. His father was troubled by his laziness, and the burden eventually led to his death. Yet, despite the sorrow and the words of his mother, Aladdin did not change his ways. One day, while playing in the streets as usual, a stranger approached him and asked his age. He then inquired whether he was the son of Mustafa the craftsman. "I am," Aladdin answered, "but my father passed away a long time ago." The stranger, who was a famous African magician, embraced him, saying, "I am your uncle, and I know you just as I knew my brother. Go home and tell your mother that I have arrived." Aladdin returned home and told his mother about his newfound uncle. "Indeed, child," his mother said, "your father had a brother, but I thought him to be lost forever." Still, she prepared breakfast and asked Aladdin to show his uncle in. The magician entered, bringing wine and fruit with him, and kissed the place where Mustafa had once sat. He asked Aladdin's mother not to be surprised by not recognizing him, explaining that he had been away for 40 years. Turning to Aladdin, the magician asked about the boy's trade. Aladdin, with his head bowed in shame, remained silent, while his mother wept. Upon learning that Aladdin had no trade and would not learn one, the magician offered to buy him a shop and provide him with goods to sell. The following day, the magician bought Aladdin fine clothes and took him on a grand tour of the city, showing him its wonders before returning home that evening. Aladdin's mother was delighted to see her son dressed so well. The next day, the magician took Aladdin to beautiful gardens outside the city gates. They sat by a fountain, and the magician took out a cake, sharing it between them. Afterward, they traveled further, heading toward the mountains. Aladdin, exhausted from the long journey, pleaded to return, but the magician entertained him with tales and encouraged him to continue. Eventually, they reached two mountains, separated by a deep valley. "Let's go farther," said the magician. "I will show you something extraordinary. Collect some sticks while I light a fire." As the fire burned, the magician placed a stick upon it, speaking ancient words. The ground began to tremble slightly, revealing a stone slab with a handle in the center. Aladdin, confused and fearful, attempted to escape, but the magician caught him and struck him, knocking him unconscious. "What have I done?" Aladdin's uncle muttered, but the magician simply said, "Don't worry, just obey me. Behind this stone is a treasure that must be yours, and no one else can touch it. You must do exactly as I say." At the mention of the word treasure, Aladdin's fears vanished, and he checked the ring as instructed, speaking the names of his father and grandfather. The stone easily lifted, revealing a set of stairs. "Go down," commanded the magician. At the bottom of those stairs, you will find an open door leading to 3 great chambers. Cut your clothes and pass through them without touching anything, or you will die instantly. And these chambers led to a beautiful garden with fine trees. Walk until you reach a terrace where a lamp shines brightly. Pour out the oil it contains and bring it to me. The magician handed Aladdin a ring, urging him to succeed. Aladdin followed all the magician's instructions, gathering fruits from the trees and finding the lamp, which he carried back to the entrance of the cave. The magician waited anxiously outside. "Hurry up and bring me the lamp," he yelled, but Aladdin refused to give it to him until he was out of the cave. The magician, furious, tossed some more dust into the fire and muttered some words, causing the lamp to return to its place. He then left the country, revealing that he wasn't Aladdin's grandfather, but a bold magician who had read in his magical books about a marvelous labyrinth that would make him the most powerful man in the world. Though only he knew where to find it, the treasure could only be claimed from the hands of another. He had chosen the naive Aladdin for this purpose, hoping to take the lamp and kill him afterward. For 2 days, Aladdin remained in the darkness, crying and lamenting. In his despair, Aladdin clasped his hands in prayer, and while doing so, accidentally broke the lamp that the magician had left behind. Instantly, a massive and wondrous genie emerged from the earth. "What do you want from me?" the genie boomed. "I am the servant of the lamp, and will obey you in all things." "Without fear," Aladdin replied. "Take me out of this place." The ground opened, and he found himself outside. Once Aladdin's eyes adjusted to the light, he made his way home. But by the time he arrived, his mother had passed away. He explained to her what had happened, showing her the fruits he had gathered from the garden, though they were actually precious gems. He then asked for some food. His mother, still weak, replied, "I have nothing in the house, but I've spun some cotton and will sell it." Aladdin asked her to keep the cotton because he intended to sell the lamp instead. Since the lamp was so dirty, he figured it might fetch a higher price. Suddenly, a tedious genie appeared and asked what he required. Aladdin, holding the lamp, asked, "Bring me something to eat." The genie returned with a silver bowl and 12 silver plates filled with rich food, 2 silver goblets, and 2 bottles of wine. When Aladdin's mother came to her senses, she marveled at the feast. "When did this party arrive?" she asked. "Don't ask, just eat," Aladdin replied. They sat down to feast until it was time to rest, and Aladdin told his mother all about the lamp. They sat down to breakfast until it was time for lunch, and Aladdin told his mother about the lamp. She asked him to sell it and avoid getting involved with the demons. "No," said Aladdin. "Since this opportunity has shown us its power, we will use it, along with the ring that I will always wear on my finger." After they had eaten everything the genie had brought, Aladdin sold one of the silver plates and continued selling them until none remained. Later, he remembered the genie, who provided him with another set of plates, and so they lived for many years. One day, Aladdin heard an order from the Sultan, who proclaimed that everyone should stay home and lock their doors, while the princess, his daughter, went about. Aladdin, driven by a desire to see her face, found it difficult to do so as she was always surrounded by guards. He hid behind the door and peeked through a chain. The princess entered, holding a candle, and she was so beautiful that Aladdin instantly fell in love with her. He returned home so changed that his mother was startled. He told her that he loved the princess so deeply that he couldn't live without her, and he wanted to ask for her hand in marriage from her father. Hearing this, his mother smiled, but Aladdin insisted that they go to the Sultan and present his request. He took a handkerchief and placed the magical fruits from the enchanted garden into it. They shined brightly and made beautiful sounds like the sweetest melodies. With these in hand to please the Sultan, Aladdin set off, confident in the power of the lamp. The Grand Vizier and the noblemen were in the room as Aladdin entered and stood before the Sultan. However, the Sultan did not pay him much attention. He returned every day for a week, standing in the same spot. On the 6th day, the Sultan told his vizier that he saw a woman entering the room every day, carrying something in a lamp. "Call her next time, so I can discover what she wants." The following day, at the vizier's signal, Aladdin's mother entered the throne room and stood until the Sultan said, "Rise, good woman, and tell me what you seek." She hesitated, so the Sultan sent for all the viziers and instructed them to speak freely, promising to forgive her for whatever she said. She then explained her son's passionate love for the princess. "I begged him to forget her," she said, "but to no avail. He threatened to do something desperate if I refused to go and ask your majesty for the princess's hand. Now I ask for your forgiveness, not only for myself, but for my son Aladdin." The Sultan kindly asked what she had brought in the lamp. She presented the shining fruits, and the Sultan was astonished. Turning to the vizier, he asked, "What do you think? Shouldn't I offer the princess to someone who values her so much?" The vizier, who desired the princess for his own son, asked the Sultan to delay the decision for 3 months, during which time he hoped his son could present something even more valuable. The Sultan agreed, and told Aladdin's mother that, although he had consented to the marriage, she should not appear before him again for 3 months. Aladdin waited patiently for nearly 3 months, but after 2 had passed, his patience began to wane. One day, his mother went to the city to buy oil, where she heard everyone talking excitedly. She asked what was going on, and the answer was that the son of the Grand Vizier was going to marry the Sultan's daughter that night. Stunned, she hurried back and told Aladdin, who was initially worried, but soon decided to act. He broke the lamp, and the genie appeared, asking, "What is your wish?" Aladdin responded, "The Sultan, as you know, has broken his promise to me, and the son of the Grand Vizier is to marry the princess. My command is that tonight, you bring me the bride and the prince's bed." "As you wish, master," said the genie. Aladdin then went to his room, and at midnight, the genie transported the bed, which contained the son of the Grand Vizier and the princess. The genie told Aladdin, "Take this new husband, put him outside in the cold, and returned to the palace at midnight. The genie then removed the prince from his bed, leaving Aladdin with the princess. "Do not fear," said Aladdin to her. "You are my wife, promised to me by your father unjustly, and no harm will come to you." The princess was too frightened to speak, and spent the most miserable night of her life, while Aladdin sat by her side and slept peacefully. At the appointed hour, the genie returned to the bed, placed the prince back, and transported the bed back to the palace. The next morning, the Sultan came to wish his daughter good morning. The son of the Grand Vizier slipped away and hid, while the princess remained silent, deeply saddened. The Sultan sent for his vizier's wife, who asked the princess, "How is it possible that you won't speak to your father? What happened?" The princess cried deeply, and finally told her mother that during the night, her bed had been taken to a strange house, and that something unimaginable had happened. Her mother didn't believe her at all, dismissing it as a mere dream. The next night, exactly the same thing happened, and when morning came, the princess remained silent. The Sultan, furious, threatened to have her head cut off. At last, the princess confessed everything, begging the Sultan to ask the son of the Grand Vizier if he would deny the truth. The Sultan then asked the Vizier to question his son, who revealed the truth, admitting that, though he loved the princess, he preferred death to another night of such torment, and wished to be separated from her. His wish was granted, and a celebration was held in honor of the truth. When the 3 months had passed, Aladdin sent his mother to remind the Sultan of his promise. She arrived at the palace, and when the Sultan saw her poverty, he was less inclined than ever to keep his word. He asked his vizier for advice, who suggested he demand such a high price for the princess that no living man could ever afford it. The Sultan then turned to Aladdin's mother and said, "Good woman, I will remember my promise, but your son must first send me 40 golden vessels filled with teeth, carried by 40 black slaves and led by 40 white ones." Brilliantly dressed, the mother of Aladdin delivered the message to him. "He expects your answer," she said. Aladdin, less inclined to delay, replied, "I won't make him wait as long as he thinks." He then summoned the genie, and in moments, 80 slaves arrived, filling the small house and garden. Aladdin instructed them to head to the palace 2 by 2, followed by his mother. They were dressed in such rich, radiant clothes that everyone gathered to see them, especially the golden vessels they carried. When they entered the palace, Aladdin's mother presented them to the Sultan, who no longer seemed worried. "Good woman, go back and tell your son I await him with open arms," he said. Without wasting time, Aladdin's mother relayed the message and rushed to tell her son. However, Aladdin called upon the genie first. "I want a bath," he commanded. "A richly embroidered robe, a dog greater than the Sultan's, and 20 slaves to attend me. Furthermore, 6 beautifully dressed slaves for my mother, and lastly, 10,000 gold coins in 10 bags. No later than that," he added, and with that, the genie set to work. Aladdin mounted his magnificent dog and walked through the streets, his slaves scattering gold along the way. The children he had played with as a boy did not recognize him. He had grown into such a handsome young man. When the Sultan saw him, he descended from his throne, embraced Aladdin, and led him to a hall where preparations were being made for a grand celebration, hoping to marry the princess that very day. But Aladdin refused, saying that he must first build a palace for her and take charge of the arrangements. Once back home, Aladdin ordered, "I will build the finest palace, made from jasper, agate, and other precious stones. In the center, you will build a large hall with a garden. The 4 walls should be made of gold, with 6 windows, all but one of which must be made of diamonds and rubies. There must be tables, chairs, and carpets. Everything must be perfect. Come and see." The next day, the palace was completed, and the genie transported Aladdin there, showing him all the magnificent features of the palace. Aladdin's orders were faithfully executed, and even the carpeting was designed to impress the Sultan. Aladdin's mother carefully dressed herself and made her way to the palace with her slaves following behind. The Sultan's musicians played trumpets and cymbals, filling the air with music and applause as she approached. She was brought to the princess, who greeted her with great honor. That evening, the princess bid her father goodbye and departed for Aladdin's palace with her mother and 100 slaves in tow. She was mesmerized by the sight of the palace and the grandeur of everything around her. Aladdin was there to receive her with open arms. "Princess," he said, "give me your beauty for my bravery, if I have ever disappointed you." Seeing him, The princess realized how much she had come to love him and returned to obey her father's wishes on this matter. That evening, Aladdin led the princess into the hall, where a grand celebration awaited. She danced with him, and they danced until midnight. The next day, Aladdin invited the Sultan to see the palace. As they entered the room with its 4 walls and 25 windows, each sparkling with rubies, diamonds, and emeralds, the Sultan exclaimed, "It's a marvelous world. But there's one thing that surprises me. Was it by accident that one window remains infinite?" "No, my lord, it was by design," Aladdin replied. "I wanted your majesty to have the glory of completing this palace." Pleased, the Sultan sent for the best craftsmen in the city, instructing them to clean the infinite window just like the others. "Sir," one of the craftsmen protested, "we cannot find enough workers." The Sultan had his own craftsmen, who quickly began the task, but after a month the work was still unfinished. Aladdin, knowing the task was futile, instructed the workers to undo their work and return the tools. At his command, the genie completed the window, much to the Sultan's amazement. When the Sultan received the completed window, he visited Aladdin again. He embraced him, while the envious vizier, watching from the side, muttered about the enchantment involved. Despite the murmurs, Aladdin won the hearts of the people with his generosity. He became the Sultan's captain of armies and won many battles for him, yet he remained as curious and content as ever, living in peace for several years. However, far away in Africa, the magician who had once tricked him remembered Aladdin. Using his magic, the magician discovered that Aladdin, instead of dying in the cave, had escaped and married a princess, living in honor and wealth. Realizing that only magic could have aided Aladdin in this, he set off to undo his success, traveling night and day until he reached the capital of China, where Aladdin's palace stood in all its grandeur. As he passed through the city, he overheard people talking about the marvelous palace. "Excuse my ignorance," he asked. "What is this palace you speak of? Have you not heard of the palace of Prince Aladdin?" was the response. "The greatest marvel in the world? Tell me, if you have the mind to see it," the magician urged. Embracing the news, he followed the directions to the palace, where he saw its splendor and realized that it had been built by the genie of the lamp. His envy consumed him, and he grew mad with jealousy. Determined to reclaim the lamp and return Aladdin to poverty, he devised a plan. Unfortunately for Aladdin, he had been hunting for 8 days, giving the magician plenty of time to work. The magician bought a dozen new lamps, placed them in a basket, and went to the palace, crying out, "New lamps for old." The princess, sitting in the hall with its 24 windows, sent a servant to investigate the noise. The servant returned, laughing, and the princess asked him to explain. "My lady," said the servant, "who could help but laugh at seeing an old man offering to exchange new lamps for old ones?" Another servant overheard this and said, "There's an old man at the corner there. He might be able to help." The sound of the old man's call was magical, as it was the very call Aladdin had left behind when he went hunting, knowing he couldn't take the lamp with him. The princess, unaware of its value, laughed bitterly as the slave took the lamp and made the exchange. She went to the magician and demanded a new lamp for the old one. The magician took it and left, while the slave hurried to take the lamp amidst the crowd's outcries. Unconcerned, the magician left behind his cries for the lamps and exited the city, heading to a remote place where he stayed until nightfall. There, he broke the lamp. The genie appeared, and at the magician's command, he transported the palace and the princess to a desolate part of Africa. The next morning, the Sultan looked out from his window at Aladdin's palace and was shocked to find it gone. He immediately sent for the vizier and asked what had become of the palace. The vizier was equally astonished and confirmed that it had vanished. The Sultan, now furious, sent the magician back to the palace and believed the tale, sending 30 men to bring Aladdin back in chains. The soldiers found Aladdin hiding, captured him, and forced him to go with them. The people, who loved Aladdin, followed armed to ensure that he wasn't harmed. He was brought before the Sultan, who ordered the vizier to have his head cut off. The vizier advanced with his sword to strike, but the crowd, enraged, broke through the curtains and began scaling the walls to rescue Aladdin. Seeing the threat, the Sultan reluctantly ordered that Aladdin be freed and forgiven in front of the public. Aladdin then asked, "What have I done wrong, my lord?" "False, wicked one," the Sultan replied. "Come here and show from the window the place where your palace once stood." Aladdin was so shocked that he could barely speak. "Where is your palace? And where is my daughter?" demanded the Sultan. "I am not so concerned with the palace, but my daughter must be returned, or you will lose your head," Aladdin begged for 40 days to find the princess, promising that if he failed, he would gladly suffer death by the Sultan's hand. His plea was granted, and he left the Sultan's presence, desperate and wandering. For 3 days, he walked as though mad, asking everyone what had become of his palace, but only receiving laughter and scorn. Eventually, he came to the banks of a river and bathed, praying as he did so. In the process, he accidentally broke the ring he had kept. The genie that had once appeared in the cave appeared again and asked for his command. "Save my life, genie," Aladdin cried. "Bring my palace back." "That is not within my power," the genie replied. "I am but the servant of the ring." "You must ask the lamp," said Aladdin, realizing the true source of his troubles. "But you cannot bring me to the palace and place me under my wife's window." The genie nodded, and soon, Aladdin found himself in Africa, beneath the princess's window, falling asleep in the dark. He woke to the sound of birds singing, and his heart was lighter than it had been in days. He realized fully that all his troubles had stemmed from losing the lamp, and wondered who could have taken it from him. That morning, the princess woke up earlier than she had since being taken to Africa by the magician, whom she was forced to endure once a day. He treated her so poorly that she could no longer bear to live there. As she was getting dressed, one of her servants glanced out and saw Aladdin. The princess rushed to the window, and the noise caught Aladdin's attention. He turned to see her. She called to him to come to her, and the joy these lovers felt upon seeing each other again was immeasurable. After a kiss, Aladdin said, "I ask you, princess, in the name of God, before we speak of anything else, for your own sake and mine, tell me what has become of the old lamp I left in the corner of the room with the 24 windows when I went hunting." "Oh, alas," she said, "I am the innocent cause of our sorrow. I exchanged the lamp." Aladdin now understood, crying out, "We must thank the African magician for this. Where is the lamp?" "He took it with him," replied the princess. "I know, because he pulled it from his chest and showed it to me. He wishes to break my faith with you and marry me," she continued. "He says that you are angry with my father. He speaks ill of you, but I only respond with my tears. If I persist, I will surely be harmed." Aladdin stayed with her for a while, then changed clothes with the first person he encountered in the city. After buying the necessary items, he returned to the princess, who led him through a small door at the side. "Put on your finest clothes," Aladdin said to her, "and greet the magician with smiles, which will make him believe that I have been forgotten." The princess listened attentively, and when Aladdin left, she began to prepare herself for the magician's arrival. For the first time since her journey to China, she wore a hat and diamond-encrusted clothing, and seeing herself in a mirror, realized she was more beautiful than ever. She greeted the magician, who was greatly surprised, believing that she had given up on Aladdin, and that all her tears were in vain. "I have resolved not to cry anymore," she said to him, "and that is why I invited you for coffee. But I am tired of the wines of China, and wish to try the wines of Africa." The magician left to gather the wine, and while he was gone, the princess followed Aladdin's instructions carefully. She placed the powder that Aladdin had given her into the magician's glass. When the magician returned, she offered him a drink, asking him to toast to her health with the African wine. As a sign of reconciliation, she exchanged glasses with him. Before drinking, the magician began to speak of her beauty, but the princess interrupted him. "Let me drink first, and then you may say what you wish," she told him. She held the glass to her lips, then kept it there while the magician prepared the wine. As he took a sip, he collapsed, dead. The princess opened the door to Aladdin, who immediately wrapped his arms around her neck. But Aladdin then went to the magician's lifeless body, took the lamp from his clothing, and called upon the genie to bring the palace and everything back to China. It was done, and the princess, now back in her room, felt only 2 small surprises and the faint thought that everything was finally returning to normal, back home. The Sultan, who had been sitting in his room, crying for the loss of his daughter, opened his eyes in astonishment as he saw the palace restored, just as it had been before. He slowly approached, and Aladdin received him in the hall with the 25 windows, with the princess by his side. Aladdin explained everything that had happened, and showed the Sultan the dead body of the magician, which he could scarcely believe. A 10-day celebration was proclaimed, and it seemed as though Aladdin could now live the rest of his life in peace. But peace was short-lived. The African magician had a younger brother, who was, if possible, even more evil and more vengeful than he had been. He traveled to China to avenge his brother's death, and sought out a pious woman named Fatima, thinking she could help him in his plans. He entered her cell, pressing a sword to her chest, and ordered her to rise and make a wish before he ended her life. He exchanged clothes with her, painted his face to match hers, put on her veil, and murdered her so she could not tell anyone of his deceit. He then traveled to Aladdin's palace, and the people, believing he was the sacred woman, gathered around him, kissing his hands and asking for blessings. When he arrived at the palace, there was such noise that the princess called a servant to look out the window and ask what was happening. The servant replied that the sacred woman was healing the people with her touch, relieving their pains. The princess, who had long wished to meet Fatima, sent for her. When the magician arrived at the princess's chamber, he offered a prayer for her health and prosperity. Once he had finished, the princess invited him to sit and requested that he stay with her always. The false Fatima, eager to stay, agreed, but kept her servant nearby out of fear of being discovered. The princess showed her the palace and asked what she thought of it. "It is truly beautiful," said the false Fatima. "But in my mind, there is only one thing." "What is that?" asked the princess. "If only a rock egg were placed in the middle of this palace," the magician replied, "this world would be truly magnificent." After this, the princess could think of nothing else but the rock egg. When Aladdin returned from hunting, he found her in a terrible mood. He asked what was troubling her, and she told him that all her joy in the palace had been ruined by the desire for the rock egg placed in the center of it. "If that is all," Aladdin replied, "soon you will be happy again." He left and laughed, and when the genie appeared, Aladdin commanded him to bring the rock egg. The genie gave a cry so loud and terrible that everything around them began to tremble. "Beautiful!" the genie cried. "Is it not enough that I have done everything for you? But now you command me to bring my master and place him in the center of your palace? You and your wife and your palace deserve to be burned to the ground. But this demand does not come from you. It comes from the brother of the African magician whom you destroyed. He is the one who planted this desire in your wife's mind. Beware," the genie warned, "for this could mean your death." With that, the genie vanished. Aladdin returned to the princess, telling her that he had a headache, and asking that the sacred Fatima be removed to place her hands upon him. But as the magician approached, Aladdin, gripping his sword, thrust it into the magician's heart. "What have you done?" cried the princess. "You've killed the sacred woman." "No," Aladdin replied, "but a wicked magician." He then told her how she had been deceived. After this, Aladdin and his wife lived in peace. He succeeded the Sultan when he passed away and ruled for many years, leaving behind a long line of kings. And that, dear friends, is the story of Aladdin and his magical lamp, a tale of courage, intelligence, and the power of believing in one's dreams. If you enjoyed this adventure, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell icon so you never miss another enchanting story from Folklore. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep believing, and let the magic of stories shine in your world. See you in the next adventure.